This morning, a White House official referred to the coronavirus as the Kung flu to my face. Makes me wonder what they're calling it behind my back. This tweet from CBS reporter Wen Jiajiang after a March 17th press conference summarized the racial tensions amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. A look at the tweet's replies showed some sympathetic responses, but the majority consisted of "she could be lying" or "it's not racist, that's humor." 3 days later, comedian Chrissy Mayer received backlash for parodying the 1970s Kung Fu Fighting song reimagined as Kung Flu Fighting, alongside some of her fellow non-Asian comedians. I went on Twitter in hopes of reasoning with her, but the responses I received were either GIFs mocking Asian stereotypes or that Kung Flu is funny and totally harmless. This series of events got me to start thinking, why are jokes about Asian people and culture considered funny in America and therefore acceptable? As a career marketer and content strategist, I've always been fascinated by the power the media and storytelling had on its audience. I remember there was a boy named Jason in the 6th grade who would taunt my friend Ming by calling out her name in a really accented way to incite laughter from fellow classmates. Day after day, Ming would just ignore him and no one ever addressed it. One day, the teacher happened to show Disney's Mulan in class. Mulan was at the time the only Disney movie and one of the few movies that highlighted Asian characters in a multifaceted way and showed the Chinese cultural values of family and bravery. I noticed Jason very much engrossed in Mulan's storyline, and after that, he gradually stopped making fun of Ming's name, all on his own. Such is the power of media and storytelling in forming audience perception, especially that of young people's. I also think back to some of my favorite movies growing up in America. I loved movies from the 60s to the 80s because I like the classics that have withstood the test of time. One of my favorites was Breakfast at Tiffany's, a story about a chic yet troubled socialite named Holly Golightly, played by my personal style icon, Audrey Hepburn. And who could forget the iconic 80s coming-of-age story, 16 Candles, with an ever-so-relatable heroine in Molly Ringwood. These heartwarming films had powerful female leads that I looked up to. However, the comedic moments featured Asian characters that now tugged at me in a really strange way. I'd always known the characters were there, but somehow they never struck me as offensive before. In fact, it was as if I had been wearing a veil all my life that made me numb to them and feel that they were normal. After seeing countless jokes about Asian people in the past few weeks since the pandemic broke out, especially some that are very hateful in nature, I've noticed that my veil has fallen off.
Mr. Go right way. Someday, Mr. Go right way. I protest!
Oh, darling, I am sorry, but I lost my key.
But that was 2 weeks ago. You cannot go on or keep ringing my bell. You disturb me. You must have a key made.
With buck teeth, slanted eyes, and thick glasses, actor Mickey Rooney portrayed a yellow-faced role in Breakfast at Tiffany's as Holly's upstairs neighbor, Mr. Yunioshi. He often ran into things in a really exaggerated way to nod to the joke that Asians can't see well. This film was also made about a decade and a half ago after the World War II tensions with Japan and the Japanese internment camps, showing that the tensions really had a resounding effect on how Asians and Asian Americans were portrayed in the American media.
What's happening, hot stuff?
Very clever dinner. Appetizing food fitting neatly into interesting round pie.
It's a quiche.
How do you spell?
Well, you don't spell it, son. You eat it.
With his arrival signaled by a gong, Long Dak Dong was the foreign exchange student of unknown Asian origin that provided comic relief in 16 Candles with his crazy antics, signature lines like, "Oh, hey, sexy girlfriend," and a very tall American girlfriend that was meant to make him look demasculated and laughable. In fact, Asian American boys that grew up in the latter half of the 80s complained that they were called donkers in junior and high schools and were taunted with Dong's accented lines. What these characters all have in common is that they're one-dimensional and highly stereotyped caricatures of Asian people created specifically for the purposes of comedy. After decades of reinforcement in American film and media, it is no wonder that these passing occurrences of racism have become accepted as a good laugh. They have been so ingrained in our culture that it's become normalized, even to Asian Americans like myself. I saw some comments online that argued, well, why deprive the people of a good laugh? Kung Flu is funny and it helps take our minds off of the current situation. Well, if you really think about it, Kung Flu is no different than Mr. Yunioshi or Long Dak Dong in that it places misguided racial stereotypes as jokes. And additionally, it places a layer of blame and stigmatization on the virus's identity as Chinese and by consequence Asian. After all, Kung Flu is so closely related to Chinese culture in America that any mention of the word may as well as be replaced with Chinese. So Kung Flu is essentially Chinese virus disguised as a joke and works to label Chinese and Asian American communities as disease-carrying and perpetually foreign in a comical context. I think back to all of the progress made in representation by films like Crazy Rich Asians or Parasite, with its all-Asian cast and multifaceted characters. And I didn't want this positive inclusion of people who look like me to end. And I also didn't want the celebration of Asian identity in America to be so short-lived. So the next time you hear Kung Flu as a joke, think about how and why this type of humor has been ingrained in the film and media that we consume. Instead of just accepting it, really unpack how it makes you feel. Were you aware of any explicit or implicit racial undertones? Do you feel used to it because of its common occurrence? Or are you uncomfortable, but you didn't want to make it a big deal? I asked myself these questions too, and I've realized that it all starts with this process of self-awareness. Through this exercise, I was able to realize that it's okay for me to feel uncomfortable about a joke, and I am empowered to believe that I should not be portrayed in this way. Because it's only when we become aware can we start the journey to change this narrative. Thank you.